j'oublie. Les services d'interprétation vont être fournis, mais il ne reste qu'à peu près une dizaine d'appareils. Alors, si vous voulez l'interprétation dans une langue ou dans l'autre, ben, vous pouvez toujours vous prévaloir de l'équipement. That being said, if you do have a cellular telephone of any kind, any device, please turn it off or at least put it on vibration. If you think you might leave the auditorium while we're debating, please sit in the back so you don't disrupt the flow of the proceedings. And interpretation services are offered if you want them. Thank you.
Même si je t'aurais en faire un lunch, même si tu faisais pas ça. C'est intéressant, la discussion qu'on a eue.
Ça me fait plaisir. Mais donc, effectivement, si je regarde ça, excuse-moi, je ne sais pas pourquoi j'apprécie. Alors, bienvenue à cette deuxième demi-finale du débat oratoire des Jeux de 2016. Est-ce que vous pourriez, pour les fins de l'auditoire, identifier le numéro de votre équipe, s'il vous plaît? Pardon? 20. Vous représentez le gouvernement? Oui. Et 24. Alors, pour l'auditoire, sachez que l'équipe 20 représentant le gouvernement se trouve à notre gauche sur la scène et par conséquent, l'opposition est représentée par l'équipe numéro 24 à notre droite. La résolution du gouvernement est qu'il soit résolu que le gouvernement du Canada exige la divulgation auprès des clients des commissions liées à la distribution des produits d'assurance et des fonds distincts. Be it resolved that the Government of Canada requires disclosure to clients of any commissions related to the sale of insurance products and segregated funds. Sans plus attendre, Monsieur le Premier ministre, vous pouvez ouvrir, vous avez 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of the House, opposition, colleagues of government. We stand here before you today to discuss Canadian business, which we are proud to describe as both ethical and, of course, profitable. We stand on a motion for disclosure of the commission made from insurance products and segregated funds. This is because the Canadian government believes our citizens should be treated fairly, and we urge this transparency to be implemented for business and society as a whole within Canada. The points are sales dynamic, broker's best interest, and further points will be brought up by my colleagues. Sales dynamic. This creates a illumination on the wants versus needs. The client will obtain what is needed instead of what they misjudge of what they necessarily want. We will have a trust between specialist and client. This is a sales scenario that is in fact needed for this domain. With this dialogue, we, yes?
Do you have any current evidence that brokers are right now treating clients unfairly?
No, thank you for your question. No, we do not have any evidence on unfair treatment, although through any sales with commission, we do all agree that there is a form of incentive there. We see the point. It is the job to sell insurance. Most make a commission, if not all, but should that really be the incentive? In something as personal, serious, and essential as, let's say, life insurance, it is the Canadian civilians' need. No, it is their right to know these details. Second point, the broker's best interest. The comparison between commission made through the service sold. If the broker sells a service that they make high commission that either fits in the categories of the following two, the best option for the client, or showing that this is not the best option for the client. This proves that, or helps the broker improve their image, create a trust with clientele. In fact, they could show they have no reason to hide how much money they are making, how much commission they're being made from this service sold. At the moment, insurance salesmen are perceived as pressure salesmen. They make most of their income through commission by showing the clients that, in fact, one option has higher commission, one option has lower. They tell them, well, client can see this. Therefore, decide this is your best option. Through transparency, they are in a way protected. They have reasons to not hide anything. Why so? They would be caught. It would be easy to see that they sold the option that has, in fact, the highest commission rate for the salesman. These reasons are, in fact, why this motion must pass. Side opposition will come forth and say things along the lines of confidentiality for the salesman. Well, how about confidentiality between the salesman and the client on such an important matter, such as insurance? The government here comes forth and demands that this motion must pass. The reasons for Canadian values that will be further brought up by colleagues. The image of Canadians, as stated before, through ethical business, through profitable business. This dialogue must be had between the salesperson and the consumer. For these four reasons, this is why this motion will and must pass. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur le Premier ministre. Maintenant, la parole est au chef de l'opposition pour une période de 5 minutes.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Side government comes up here and says that they want to create more trust within the insurance market. And yet when we ask, is there any evidence that commissions have led to any bad sales of insurance, they say no. I think the fact that side government right away assumes that commissions must mean some bad intentions from brokers is exactly why their bill is going to create more distrust within the market. And that's a market that can't afford to have distrust at the point where people no longer trust their brokers. You end up with worse insurance being sold to people. You end up with more direct brokerage, which has a whole host of problems. And most importantly, you have a lot of people simply getting off their insurance at all, which is majorly detrimental to their health and their well-being. We on side opposition stand for three things today. We stand for a stable insurance market based on trust. We stand for the physical well-being of each and every Canadian consumer and what they have on them. And most importantly, we stand, yes, for the confidentiality of brokers, as they so rightfully predicted. So we're going to get into 5 points, 3 in my speech and 2 in my partner's. But I think that we can already agree that at the point where side government agrees, there is absolutely no problem that they're solving. They are literally only creating a new one, and that is majorly problematic for their case. So first, let's talk about the distrust that they create and how that is detrimental to the average Canadian consumer. Understand that they've basically already made this case for us, that at the point that you suddenly see how much commission your broker makes, you right away distrust them. First off, a lot of Canadians don't know that that is most of their broker's salary, but most importantly, even the ones that do don't necessarily know the number for each individual insurance provider. As a result, they trust their brokers to be independent, to try to give them the best insurance. So what's the problem on side government? Well, the problem is that once it's spelled out in front of them, the first thing people do is panic, and that has 3 major impacts. First, a lot of people are immediately going to stop using independent brokers and instead go toward direct brokerage. What's the issue with that? Well, direct brokers actually do have a negative incentive to try to give you bad insurance as long as it means that you stay within their company. Even if their insurance isn't perfect for you, even if it's more expensive than the competitor, if you go to direct brokerage, they are trying to sell you their insurance alone. And the problem is that a lot of people are going to buy into that just because direct brokers have slightly less commission. They totally create the problem that they're trying to solve for on their side by giving people worse insurance as a result. But second, you're going to have a whole host of people who just end up leaving the insurance market as a whole because the first thing that they do is say, I don't want to be a part of this anymore. The best example of this that already happened in Canada was with Scotiabank in the summer of 2015, who actually tried this exact policy in trying to tell people how much their brokers were making. Thousands upon thousands of Canadians immediately fled away from Scotiabank, all because they suddenly thought that they were being screwed over when those prices were just as competitive as everyone else. People panic, and as a result of them not having any insurance, that means that their property and their lives are more at risk as a result with absolutely no financial aid available to them. That is hugely detrimental to all of those Canadians and something that they completely ignore on their side of the house. Finally, even for those few people who actually do stay with brokerage firms, they're often so focused on the idea that they don't want their broker to screw them over that they end up focusing only on what the commission value is, ignoring whether or not this is the best policy for them. Someone who lives in BC needs an expensive insurance policy against forest fires, but if they're so focused on making sure that their broker doesn't screw them over by giving them a high commission, and they therefore take a less expensive policy, when their house goes down in flames, when their business goes down in flames, they're the ones that foot the bill because they weren't properly covered. That is hugely detrimental. Third, let's get into one of the problems that comes up in their case that actually leads to higher prices for insurance. How does this happen? Well, understand that at the point where consumers can see all of the commissions that are being given again, across insurance companies, that other insurance companies can also see that. That as a result, they can offer other brokers higher and higher commission rates just to get the best brokers on their side. The problem with that is that they are literally creating a higher price for each and every Canadian consumer inadvertently. We basically created a giant Canadian insurance cartel without meaning to, where they can basically continue to jack up commission rates solely to get your business without any say from the Canadian consumer. That's hugely problematic for them, and again, something that they choose not to address. In the end, the points brought up by government have good faith, but they don't actually work for Canadians. They're going to end up creating less trust in the market, which ends up really hurting a lot of Canadians who necessarily need to be willing to trust their independent brokers. As we've said, we stand for 3 things on our side: a stable market, confidentiality for brokers, and most importantly, the physical safety of Canadians, which they have blatantly ignored. For all of these reasons, we are so proud to oppose.
Thank you. La parole va maintenant au premier représentant du gouvernement pour une période de 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of the opposition, colleagues of the government, I'd like to take a moment to take a step back and look at the real issue at hand here. What is the government trying to implement? The government is trying to require disclosure to clients of any commissions related to the sales of insurance products and segregated funds. Now, why? We've mentioned a few issues at hand and reasons why we believe this is the best step to take. Changing sales dynamic, broker interest, but most importantly, ensuring that the customer's best interests are the focus of institutions. First of all, I'd like to mention a point. There's a huge risk when brokers' interests are placed first by not disclosing commissions. Not disclosing commissions is simply a reason that can lead to pressure sales. The nature itself of of commissions is pressure sales. Think of your grandmother. What if your grandmother needs an insurance for a life insurance policy, for example? What if her broker's sole purpose is to push a product that he knows he'll get a higher commission on? Will her best interest be taken at hand? No. By disclosing the commission, her best interest will be placed first. We'd like to emphasize the trust relationship that must be placed between the broker and the consumer. One should trust the person in which they are instilling the funds, their money, their hard-earned money from Canadians. And it's a duty and responsibility to ensure that the funds that are placed in trust are well managed. We must focus on consumers' best interest. Pressure on sales leads to a less protected consumer. And based on Canadian values, such as the emphasis on transparency, the disclosure of commissions related to insurance products and segregated funds is crucial for a society for ensuring that Canadian citizens make sounder and better choices. I'd like to rebut a point that the opposition brought forward. That by knowing that there's a commission, or that by disclosing, for example, with the Scotiabank example, when Scotiabank made available that commissions were made, that consumers are automatically going to flee. Well, if all banks or all insurance institutions disclose that there are commissions, we believe that this will create a bigger trust in institutions, and that at the end of the day, the consumers' needs and consumers will be put forth, which is something extremely important in Canada. Thank you.
Thank you. Maintenant, la parole est au premier représentant de l'opposition. Temps de parole, 3 minutes.
Monsieur le Président, cher public, chers collègues au gouvernement, chers collègues à l'opposition, j'aimerais d'abord apporter un argument très important pour vous expliquer pourquoi aujourd'hui le gouvernement cherche réellement à créer un problème et à l'opposition on vous explique pourquoi le statu quo est parfaitement acceptable. N'oublions pas que le gouvernement ici a le fardeau de la preuve de nous prouver que justement son projet de loi améliorerait le statu quo dans lequel nous ne voyons absolument aucun problème. J'expliquerai cela avec mon premier argument avant de passer à une solide réfutation. Mon argument se nommera donc de la nature du revenu des courtiers. Comme l'a très clairement affirmé le premier ministre, le revenu des commissions des courtiers représente une majeure, voire l'unique portion de leurs revenus. Ce n'est ni un bonus faramineux, par exemple, d'un CEO de compagnie, ni un revenu indécent dont on devrait avoir honte. Cela dit, en demandant aux courtiers de révéler de façon comme si c'était honteux ce revenu de commission. On cherche à vilipender leur réputation. On cherche à affecter la réputation des courtiers qui sont pourtant des acteurs très importants du marché de l'assurance. Mon collègue à l'opposition l'a très bien expliqué à quel point c'est important d'avoir des courtiers auxquels on fait confiance. Et ici, du côté du gouvernement, on cherche justement à les traîner dans la boue, à en faire d'eux des êtres auxquels les Canadiens ne peuvent pas faire confiance. Je passerai donc maintenant à une réfutation des arguments apportés du côté du gouvernement. On nous parle d'abord, sans expliquer cette prémisse, qu'il y aura qu'il y a un problème envers la confiance que les Canadiens portent envers les courtiers. On ne nous a pas expliqué du tout, on n'a pas apporté du tout d'arguments, de preuves sur pourquoi est-ce que vraiment il y a un manque de confiance. Nous ne croyons pas du tout que c'est le cas. Et encore une fois, c'est le fardeau du gouvernement de nous expliquer pourquoi est-ce que le statu quo en ce moment n'est pas acceptable. On nous parle également du fait que on nous a d'ailleurs très bien expliqué que la majeure partie du revenu des courtiers est faite grâce à ces commissions. C'est justement ce qu'on explique. Ce n'est pas un revenu farfelu, un revenu exotique. C'est vraiment un revenu nécessaire de la part des courtiers, c'est leur salaire. Et donc, vraiment, ce n'est rien de quoi les courtiers devraient avoir honte et quelque chose, justement, que le gouvernement devrait porter comme négatif. On nous parle ensuite, de façon plutôt loufoque, des ventes sous pression, sans nous expliquer en rien en quoi le fait que les commissions soient divulguées change le fait que la vente soit sous pression. Par exemple, si je travaille dans un magasin de vêtements, que ma commission soit de 5 ou 10 %, la vente sous pression sera tout aussi importante. Et donc, si on parlait d'éliminer complètement les commissions, l'argument pourrait sembler utile, mais comme les commissions vont encore exister, l'argument ne tient pas du tout, il n'a absolument aucune valeur ici. Finalement, j'aimerais apporter le point que la plus grande valeur d'un courtier, c'est sa réputation. Et donc, des ventes sous pression ou de la malhonnêteté va affecter ses revenus à long terme, qui, encore une fois, sont la majeure partie de ses revenus. Merci beaucoup.
Merci. Alors, la parole revient au second représentant du gouvernement pour une période de 4 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, members of side opposition, my colleagues in government, esteemed audience. The Government of Canada today is requiring disclosure to clients of any commissions related to the sale of insurance products and segregate funds. This motion is based on Canadian values. As a government, the most important element of our mandate is to protect the interests of our people. By imposing certain standards when it comes to the sale of insurance products and segregate funds, we're continuing to care for society as a whole. These products are important financial tools that can secure people's hard-earned assets and help them worry less about the well-being of their belongings, but most importantly, of themselves and their loved ones. Unfortunately, given the turbulent times we face in the business world today, there are many people who try to cheat their way through to success, most often at the expense of the people around them. The government is standing proud in this resolution and wants to protect consumers who lack the knowledge when it comes to this topic. Elderly people who want to place their money in a fund, or young families looking to insure their first homes should not be cheated, and institutions should respect their mandates of providing the best possible service. Canada is a proud country who has values, conducts itself ethically, and cares for its people. Canadian business should do the same and treat each other with the respect and dignity that is a given in this country. It all starts with one sale or one trade. When trust is built between two people, it can translate into other areas in society and help Canada prosper instead of crumble. This resolution is an example of the values we stand for, and it is in the best interest of Canadians. This is truly a non-issue, and we are appalled that side opposition is against developing trust and transparency between consumers and businesses. The example of Scotiabank in the summer of 2015 was brought up. As my colleague mentioned, as side opposition mentioned, it was a dreaded time filled with panic and worry. Panic settles because it was not founded on anything substantial. It was one bank. If it is government regulation, everybody will have to comply to these rules, and it will create a fair marketplace. We're not jeopardizing broker salaries. We understand that their livelihood depends on commission. We're not lowering commissions. We're not cutting commissions. People will just be aware of the products they're buying and how much the brokers will benefit from the sale. We want people to buy things they need and that will benefit them, not buy things that the broker will try to benefit from themselves. How hard is it for somebody to go to work every day and benefit the people they're servicing and care for their needs instead of simply trying to find the best way to fill their pockets as much as possible and not care about the well-being of the people around them? As I mentioned, Canada is an ethical country and a profitable place of business. If we begin or continue to establish a place of business that doesn't have trust between the participating members, business cannot continue to flourish as it does today. It is for these reasons that the Canadian government strongly believes that consumers deserve to know how much brokers make in terms of the commission when it comes to sale. How many times have we heard that brokers conduct trades in segregate funds and only do so in order to have volume going, have traffic within their portfolios? People deserve to know why things are happening and how much their representatives are making. We want to establish care and trust and respect between participants and make sure that everybody is treated fairly. The government stands proud behind this resolution, and we truly think it must stand. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur le représentant. La parole va maintenant à la seconde représentante de l'opposition pour une période de 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, today we've seen a side government that's really painted brokers in a horrible light, as very mischievous, untrustworthy, and cheating people. And for that reason, I'd like to formally apologize to anyone in this room that is a broker and that feels that they've been attacked in this way, because this is definitely not the case. On-side opposition, we don't see brokers in this light. Instead, we see that their ultimate incentive is to create the best policy for their clients, and we see that that's in their best interest. That's what's incentivizing, not the commissions. I'm going to go into very thorough refutation and analysis on this point in my refutation, but first I'll be bringing up the fifth and final point for side opposition. Okay, so what we see is that under the status quo, we've all agreed that these kinds of confidentiality of salaries and commissions are there for a reason. We haven't seen a side government, who's proven to us that insurance commissions are significantly different from those in retail, sales, and investment. Instead, we've realized that they haven't been able to tell us any reasons in which there's a problem under the status quo, because there are already regulations in order to ensure that this cheating does not exist, right? Like, because they can't find a problem because there is none, because there already are regulations. We see that ultimately we have things like cap commissions, very thorough documentation of the kinds of policies, of the reasons and like why you're giving someone this policy. We see this in investment banking, where Canada has now passed even more laws that ensure that that brokers have the kinds of documentation in order to prove that every single sale is not based on commission, but based on like hard evidence from the news, right? And we see that that's definitely the case in insurance companies as well. And what we need to do if we want to solve the kinds of problems that side government says is existing is ensure that this kind of documentation is encouraged and continued in the process. We ultimately see that like forced disclosure of commission is ultimately like not what we want. We have these kinds of regulations in place that when a client asks what kind of commission is being based off a policy, that is disclosed in confidence with the client, and so that they can have a dialogue based on, okay, this is the policy, this is the, if you wonder what the commission is, this is the commission, but let's have a dialogue as to why this commission exists, rather than it being forced disclosure and not being able to have this dialogue. We see that this kind of a policy wherein you can disclose if asked creates a dialogue, where the kind of policy that side government is proposing does not allow for this dialogue. It's just kind of like a forced upon them. Okay, so let's move on to some very thorough refutation. So what we saw on the first speaker of side government is come up and tell us with a straight assertion saying, we all agree that there is an incentive, right? Just because commissions exist, there is an incentive. But I'm sorry, side government, this is just another thing that we disagree on. The incentive for brokers is to create the best policy for their customers because brokers make most of their money based on the number of clients that they have, selling their policies to them, rather than very, very high commissions on few sales. We ultimately see that it's in the broker's best interest in order to ensure that they keep selling the best policy over and over and over so that people keep coming back to them when they need different kinds of insurances to be shopped for, right? We ultimately see that these people are going to tell, it also works on word of mouth in order to get the most number of clients, in order to ensure that people are happy, rather than people getting these kinds of policies and then not being happy with them because they see that someone else paid a lower commission, someone else was not protected in the way that they thought that they were going to be protected. We see that that's how lawsuits happen against insurance companies. We see that there's ultimately in the best incentive to create the best policy for these people, because when it is enacted, they'll realize, okay, did the insurance broker screw me over? No, he didn't, because we have these regulations in place. We see that ultimately side government is trying to pose that this is in everyone's best interest. What we see is that under the status quo, we already have everyone's best interest in mind, both of the broker, in order to ensure that this kind of industry succeeds, and we also have that of the client, which is why we're very, very proud to oppose. Thank you.
Merci. Maintenant, pour conclure, la position du gouvernement. Monsieur le Premier ministre, vous avez 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of the House, opposition, colleagues of government. Side government stands here and clearly states, we are here for the people. We are here for both the brokers, we are here for also the clients. We are here for a better sales dynamic, brokers' best interest, customers' best interest, Canadian values. People want to know where their money is going. It's as simple as that. More distrust through transparency. Based on trust, how can knowing of commission create a distrust when it is a level playing field? When all insurance is all commission from insurance is well known from all the providers, from all the salesmen. In fact, side opposition stands here and technically says, well, if commission were technically removed, nothing would happen. Commission isn't a real incentive. Because of commission caps, for some reason, a broker doesn't want to reach their cap every year. This is what side opposition is saying. Side opposition is standing a firm stance, yes, to protect brokers' confidentiality. But that is it. They're assuming that there will be a distrust through transparency. They're assuming that mandatory disclosure will create a distrust from all providers. A higher price, cartel. Side opposition is standing here and creating a slippery slope argument, a slippery slope fallacy. We didn't assume brokers are mischievous. No. Side government did not say this whatsoever. We are here before you to say clients, the general population, don't know where their money is going. They don't know exactly how much commission these salespeople are making. They do not know if, in fact, they're being sold a service that has higher commission rates for the broker. This information isn't there. We are making it mandatory across the board in order to protect them, in order for brokers to know that the clientele knows this. Sadly, some people don't even know that insurance brokers make commission. Sadly, the ignorance from side opposition to assume that this swindling does not happen ever, whatsoever, that commission isn't a real issue, that commission isn't a real incentive. This is why side government stands proudly to say this motion will pass. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur le Premier ministre. Maintenant, pour clore la position de l'opposition, Monsieur le chef de l'opposition, vous avez 3 minutes.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. The last Speaker of government comes up and says the word assume a lot, but I'm not actually sure he knows what that means. Because throughout this debate, we have explained time and time again through logical steps how at the point where you confront consumers with the different types of commission that your broker is going to get, that immediately creates distrust that they have never proven currently exists in the status quo. But even if you believe every single point that they've put out there, that this is somehow going to create more trust through transparency, never once do they give you a tangible impact, a harm or a benefit that they are creating on their side through that. They are trying to create transparency for the sake of transparency, and we tell you that there are tangible harms to that transparency that legitimately hurt Canadians, both brokers and consumers alike, that they choose to ignore because they like to say the word assume. So let's talk about exactly what we've heard throughout this debate. Right? They say that they want a better dynamic between consumers and brokers when they're talking about a deal, except that when you're focused on the commission in front of you, that's not a better dynamic. That is constantly you as a consumer trying to make sure that you're not getting screwed by your broker by trying to get them the lowest commission possible. We've explained to you how that gives them worse insurance as a result, and they decide not to engage with that. We also explain, they also say that they want what's in the broker's best interest because through transparency, they'll somehow get decent commissions. Except we explain how a lot of brokerage firms end up suffering at the point that people suddenly distrust brokers a lot more. And this is, again, type of analysis that they don't bother doing, nor do they refute on our side of the house. Right? At the point that we are left with deciding who has given us more analysis to believe on which side you're going to get more distrust, it has clearly been our side. The third point is the most insulting as a Canadian, where they say that we should do this for Canadian values, for which they mention one, transparency. Let me give you a few other Canadian values that they hurt on their side of the house, right? The safety of everyday Canadians, our economy, and the confidentiality that we all like to enjoy. They say in their first speech that they like to have confidentiality between consumers and brokers, but that is literally what they're taking away at the point that anyone can see the type of commission that is coming out of that sale. That point literally makes no sense. So what we're finally left with is a side government that has actually admitted at this point that there will be panic for 1 month, 1 year, some amount of time, because we've given you a tangible example, the only example in this debate, of this sort of policy being implemented and the resulting consumer panic that ensues, and all they can say is, eventually it will pass. And we say that it is not worth that. We say that it hurts Canada and it hurts Canadians to have to deal with that panic for a month. That could mean financial collapse for parts of our economy, and there is no reason to want that. In the end, you have to do two things if you really want to vote for side government. To A, inherently believe that all brokers are bad people for which they give you no evidence, and B, weigh this debate in saying that transparency for transparency's sake is worth hurting a lot of Canadians in the future. For all of these reasons, we are so proud to oppose.
Thank you. Merci aux deux équipes. Ceci met fin à la deuxième demi-finale de cet avant-midi. Félicitations aux deux équipes.